Marcus found the alien woman in the ravine, because he heard whimpering, and when she flinched from his touch and whispered, "Please, no more, I will be good," he felt rage and sorrow war inside him as he carefully lifted her broken body. He had been hiking alone, on one of the many trails, near his cabin deep within the mountains. The day was quiet until a faint sound caught his ear, a soft whine that seemed out of place in nature's symphony. Marcus paused, straining to hear more clearly, over the rustling leaves and chirping birds. It came from below him, far enough down into the ravine he couldn't see it yet. Swallowing hard against a lump in his throat, he began to descend with caution, every step testing the unstable ground beneath him. His knees had given way before after years of war and harsh terrain, but today he wouldn't let them fail again. As he moved closer, something glinted silver amidst the dark shadows. At the bottom, a figure curled into a tight ball against jagged rocks. A woman, or perhaps not human, her pale skin shimmering faintly, even in low light. She was small compared to most humans, but unmistakably feminine. Her long white hair lay tangled around her like a halo of broken dreams, and deep violet eyes gazed back at him with such pain that it felt as if he could taste the agony. They spoke without words. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying down on gentle breezes. "I'm here to help." But when she heard him approach, her body tensed so sharply, muscles coiled like springs. And then came those whispered pleas, barely audible, but piercing through Marcus's heart with a cold edge of steel and fire. "No," he said firmly as his hand reached out gently, trying not to startle her further. "No one is going to hurt you now." She recoiled despite this reassurance, trembling violently in places where bruises blossomed like flowers against twisted metal limbs or broken bones protruding through torn flesh. It was clear she couldn't trust him yet. The damage had run too deep. "Can you hold on?" Marcus asked again, his voice softer still as he tried to assess her injuries without causing further pain. "I'm going to get us out of here." A flicker crossed her eyes, none that looked suspiciously like hope before it vanished just as quickly behind walls built up over months of abuse and terror. "I will be good," she repeated faintly, so quietly Marcus almost missed it amidst the cries echoing inside his head. "Please, just get me out of here." With care that bordered on reverence, he pulled her into more comfortable positions where possible without touching wounds too badly. His hands shook with rage at whoever had done this to such a fragile being, but also fear for what might still happen if they lingered any longer. "Marcus," she whispered again as he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders after tearing off bits of fabric from hers. "I am Sytheris Vel'Keth." Sytheris, the name rang with distant echoes in Marcus' mind. Vel'Keth were known throughout the galaxy for her breathtaking beauty and grace, but also as prized trophies among criminal collectors. "Lady," he corrected gently, his voice steady despite everything else spinning out of control around them. "I'm Sergeant Cole." Sytheris shivered uncontrollably in Marcus' arms, even under layers of fabric wrapped tightly to keep her warm against the cold mountain air. Her eyes were haunted still, but there was a thread of something new threading through, spark of trust beginning to form where before only broken promises and cruelty had thrived. "You don't need to tell me your title," he continued carefully. "Just Sytheris is fine for now." She nodded weakly. Against him her entire body felt like it might collapse if she moved a single muscle too sharply. And yet, something in Marcus' tone seemed different from others who had come before her. There was an authenticity there, sincerity that almost frightened more than reassured. "Can you stand?" he asked next, testing gently to see whether he could help her up without causing further injury. "We need to get higher ground where I can set things right." With great effort she moved slightly into a sitting position, but no sooner did it appear that the action might succeed when blood started trickling again from reopened wounds in places most would prefer never seen. "No," Marcus said firmly, his voice resolute. "Not yet, Sytheris. Rest now. They'll get us out." She nodded silently this time, and closed her eyes briefly before opening them once more with a faint smile that was both sad and grateful. "Thank you," she whispered back quietly, as if afraid to break the spell of kindness hanging between them, so precariously balanced on threads thinner than spider silk. With renewed determination, Marcus set about making their way up the ravine despite his own injuries threatening every step. The climb would be brutal, but he had faced worse before when lives hung in delicate balance, and it was one more life to save, at whatever cost necessary, until they reached safety where her wounds could begin healing properly. And so began an improbable journey marked by whispered words of comfort amidst groans and whimpers of pain. A man who saw too much death still had hope burning fiercely enough within him not even the darkest abysses of cruelty could extinguish. And a shattered woman learning once more what it meant to be valued beyond mere appearance found light in unexpected places. Together, against all odds, they moved towards survival, with each step fueled by mutual determination and emerging trust between two souls bound together through shared suffering on paths less traveled, where heroes are often forged beneath the shadows of despair. As Sytheris slipped back into unconsciousness in Marcus' arms, he felt a surge of determination mixed with searing anger at whoever had done this to her. He carried her 3 miles through rugged terrain towards his cabin without breaking stride or slowing down. Each step was deliberate, each breath controlled. His woman needed him now more than ever. The first time she passed out, Marcus didn't even notice until a faint groan escaped from the back of his throat. Her wounds were numerous and deep, but there had been no rush. He moved methodically, carefully supporting her with every part of himself that wasn't wounded in an attempt to keep them both moving forward. The second time she lost consciousness was more prolonged, and Marcus knew it would be harder this time around. He checked her vitals meticulously, pulse steady if weak, breathing shallow but regular. Her body had been through hell and back. He needed to get her somewhere safe before the strain took its toll completely. "Hang on, Sytheris," he muttered under his breath as they traversed a particularly treacherous stretch of rocky terrain near the mountain's edge. "I've got you." The cabin was an old hunting lodge that Marcus had bought years ago after his wife's death, a place to be alone and heal from wounds both physical and emotional. It wasn't fancy, but it was sturdy, with walls thick enough to block out noise when he needed silence most. He set Sytheris down gently on the floor of the cabin's entranceway as soon as they arrived. The inside was Spartan, a small kitchenette equipped with basic cooking supplies and emergency medical kits, 2-bedroom, sewn for him, one that would now be her sanctuary until she could find another path forward or decide to leave. Marcus wasted no time in setting up a makeshift infirmary space near the central fireplace, where light from flames cast long shadows across the wooden walls. He cleaned his hands thoroughly before beginning the meticulous process of treating Sytheris's wounds. Every scrape, bruise, and cut was evidence of unimaginable cruelty, each mark a testament to her torment. "Whoever did this," he said aloud, as much for himself as anyone else listening, though there were none, "will never touch you again." Sytheris stirred slightly in response, but didn't wake. Marcus continued his work with steady hands that shook more from rage than from the task at hand. He cleaned her wounds meticulously, applying antiseptic and bandages while muttering reassurances to himself and Sytheris, as if doing so would somehow make what had happened less real. "Sytheris," he murmured softly, "I know you're in there somewhere." She didn't respond verbally, but the faintest trace of recognition flickered across her face. Marcus' heart clenched at seeing such vulnerability mirrored back to him. "It'll keep you safe now," he promised firmly. "No more pain if I can help it." As night fell, Sytheris remained unconscious while Marcus worked feverishly through his supplies. The cabin became a sanctuary of light and warmth compared to the cold darkness outside, where predators lurked in shadowed recesses ready to pounce on unsuspecting prey. "Whoever threw you away," he whispered fiercely as he treated one particularly severe wound, "doesn't understand what beauty truly is." Sytheris let out a soft whimper, but didn't ache fully. Marcus paused only briefly before continuing his work with renewed vigor. He was determined to see her wounds healed and the pain diminished, whatever it took. "Trust me," he whispered again, as if speaking directly into her ear rather than letting the words hang in empty air between them. I won't let you suffer any more. The night wore on, and Marcus' hands began to feel like lead with fatigue, but his resolve remained unshaken. He treated every last wound before finally sitting back and cradling Sytheris's head gently against his chest. "I'm here," he promised softly once more as dawn broke outside the window pane, "and I will never let you go." Sytheris opened her eyes slowly, blinking several times to clear them of lingering darkness, both physical and emotional. She looked up at Marcus, who watched over her with an intensity that spoke volumes about his commitment. "Thank you," she whispered again, voice hoarse from disuse and pain, but still holding a thread of gratitude mixed with confusion. "What am I doing here?" Marcus smiled gently, a rare sight for someone as stern-faced as he was known to be. But this moment called for nothing short of sincerity. "You are safe now," he said softly. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." Sytheris blinked slowly, absorbing his words like balm applied directly onto her soul after months of torment. For the first time in what felt like ages, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps there was still good left in this universe, a human being who refused to turn away from suffering. "Marcus," she said softly, as if testing out the name on her lips for the first time. "Thank you." His eyes softened further at hearing his name spoken by someone so damaged yet resilient. "You're welcome, Sytheris," he replied, voice steady, but with an underlying current of emotion that hinted at far more than just gratitude. And in those quiet moments shared between rescuer and rescued, beneath the watchful gaze of early morning light filtering through rustic cabin windows, a fragile bond began to form, a testament not only to survival against all odds, but also to hope born anew from despair's darkest depths. Days passed in a steady rhythm of care and vigilance. Each morning found Marcus awakening before dawn to check on Sytheris' condition, while every evening saw him wrapping up his medical supplies after another day of painstaking treatment. The cabin had become their sanctuary, a small space filled with the scent of antiseptic and healing remedies, as well as a quiet hope that neither could fully articulate, but both cherished deeply. Sytheris began to flinch less often at Marcus' touch, her body gradually loosening its guard against unwelcome hands after months of abuse. Her eyes still held shadows of trauma, but flickers of recognition started appearing more frequently now. On the fourth day, she spoke for the first time in what felt like ages. "Who are you?" Sytheris whispered, voice hoarse and broken from disuse. She stared at Marcus with a mixture of awareness and curiosity, a rarity given her recent past where every interaction had been laced with cruelty or indifference. Marcus looked down at her with gentle eyes, brushing away the matted strands of white hair that clung to her forehead. "My name is Marcus Cole," he replied softly. "I'm just here to help." A spark of something akin to surprise crossed Sytheris' face before she quickly schooled it back into a mask of wariness. "Why?" she asked, almost hesitantly. Marcus sighed inwardly at the question, but understood its origins all too well. He had faced similar doubts from others who could not comprehend why he risked everything for strangers during his military days. The answer remained as clear now as it did then. "You're a person," Marcus said firmly, staring back into her violet eyes with unwavering sincerity. "That's enough value." Sytheris blinked slowly, confusion mingling with disbelief in the quiet space between them. It was not lost on either of them that no one had ever uttered such words to her before, not while she still held meaning. "Why? Help me," Sytheris managed through a trembling voice. "I am broken now." Marcus' grip tightened around his medical supplies momentarily, an internal struggle playing out in the set lines of his jaw and furrowed brow. He knew better than most that value was not measured by one's physical appearance or status. It lay deeper within the essence of being alive. "You're worth more than what they took from you," Marcus replied slowly but firmly, as if speaking each word with utmost care to convey their weight. "You deserve to heal and find peace." Sytheris' eyes welled up unexpectedly then, tears spilling over despite her best efforts to remain stoic. She had never been treated this way, never given hope that she could recover beyond the pain of captivity. "Why are you so different?" Sytheris whispered through ragged breaths. "No one has ever cared like this before." Marcus sat beside her on the cot, his gaze softening as he met hers with understanding and patience. He knew all too well what it felt like to be discarded after serving a purpose. His own marriage had ended under circumstances of betrayal that left him questioning his worth. "Because you're not worthless," Marcus said quietly but firmly, "and I once let anyone make you believe otherwise." Sytheris' chest heaved with silent sobs as she clung to the rare comfort offered by a stranger. For so long, her existence had been stripped bare, a life defined only through suffering and objectification. Now in Marcus' hands, there was an offering of something far more precious: hope. "Thank you," Sytheris murmured again once her sobs quieted into shuddering breaths. "I've never felt this before." Marcus nodded quietly, the weight of his own past resonating deeply as he saw reflections of himself in this broken alien woman who had been treated with such cruelty. His hands moved methodically across Sytheris' body to check her progress and treat any new wounds that had formed overnight. "I'll take care of you," Marcus promised firmly without hesitation, "until you're ready to stand on your own again." Sytheris watched him work in a mixture of awe and gratitude. His man who refused to turn away from suffering. She was learning slowly, hesitantly, but steadily, that there were still people left whose actions spoke louder than words ever could. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across Marcus' cabin floor, Sytheris stirred for the first time, without a sound of pain escaping her lips. Her eyes opened to find Marcus seated beside her, with an expression both fiercely protective and achingly tender, a rare sight that spoke volumes about his commitment. "Feeling better?" Marcus asked gently as he reached out to touch her cheek softly. His calloused fingers brushed against the bruised skin, a gesture more of comfort than assessment now. Sytheris blinked slowly at him before nodding once, eyes filled with something akin to wonder. "Yes," she whispered softly, almost in disbelief. "I am." Marcus smiled, thin, a rare sight for someone as stern-faced and experienced as he was known to be, his gaze softening further still under the weight of her fragile recovery. "Good," Marcus replied quietly but firmly, squeezing Sytheris' hand gently before returning his attention back to attending to her wounds. "Well, keep moving forward." Sytheris watched him in silence for a long moment, absorbing both his actions and words like balm applied directly onto her soul. After months of torment, for the first time in what felt like ages, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps there was still good left in this universe, a human being who refused to turn away from suffering. "Marcus," Sytheris said softly, as if testing out his name on her lips for the first time, "thank you." His eyes softened further at hearing her voice utter his name after days of silence. The gratitude and care she felt resonated deeply within him. It was a feeling he had hoped to give, but never fully expected in return. "You're welcome," Marcus replied softly as well, though there was an underlying current of emotion that hinted far more than mere gratitude. "I'm here now." In those quiet moments shared between rescuer and rescued, beneath the watchful gaze of early morning light filtering through rustic cabin windows, a fragile bond began to form, a testament not only to survival against all odds, but also hope born anew from despair's darkest depths. And in that space filled with warmth and sanctuary, Sytheris Vel'Keth felt something stir within her chest. For the first time since she had been thrown into this ravine, a flicker of renewed belief. As twilight descended upon the rugged mountainside surrounding Marcus' secluded cabin, a sense of impending danger began to seep into his bones, a feeling honed by years on the front lines where instincts were often all that stood between life and death. He glanced at Sytheris lying in their makeshift infirmary space, her eyes closed as if she had finally found rest after days of torment. "Feeling better?" Marcus asked gently as he checked the bandages around her torso again, his hands steady despite the tightening knot inside him. Sytheris opened her violet eyes and nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered softly, a tentative smile tugging at the corner of her lips for what seemed like an infinitesimal moment before fading away entirely. It was progress in its own right, but Marcus knew it would take more than a few days to heal wounds that ran deeper than skin. Suddenly, his comms unit crackled with static. He grimaced, recognizing the telltale signs of someone trying to hack into his secure Linyan alarm system he had set up shortly after settling here in these mountains as an added layer of protection against prying eyes and unwanted visitors. His fingers moved swiftly over the interface before pausing. Marcus, Sytheris' voice was a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the tension building inside him like a fine blade carving into stone. He nodded toward her without looking away from the screen. "Stay here," he instructed, his tone leaving no room for argument or hesitation. The comms buzzed again with renewed aggression, and Marcus swiftly moved to activate his security cameras, peering out at the rapidly darkening world beyond his front door. A chill ran down his spine when he saw a trio of figures moving through the trees, professional hunters in black uniforms emblazoned with Collector Tharn's insignia. "Collector Tharn sends for me," Marcus muttered to himself as much as to Sytheris, though it didn't change what needed doing now. "They are coming here." Sytheris sat up instantly upon hearing his words, her violet eyes wide and fearful despite the efforts she was making not to show such vulnerability around him anymore. "They will kill you," she said quietly but firmly, placing a hand on Marcus' arm, as if willing strength into him through touch alone. "You must leave while there is still time." Marcus shook his head once without breaking eye contact with her. His smile, Thangrim, and knowing, was one that spoke volumes about the kind of man he had become after decades of war. "They will try," Marcus replied evenly, more to himself than anyone else, as much as it was meant for Sytheris' ears too. "But they'll regret ever setting foot on this mountain." Before she could argue further, Marcus guided her back towards their sleeping quarters and instructed her to take shelter in the basement until he gave her permission otherwise. He had spent countless hours fortifying that place against intruders just like these ones now closing in, a makeshift bunker built for survival rather than comfort. "Don't come out," Marcus said firmly, as they entered, his voice leaving no room for debate despite how much he wanted to give Sytheris choices and freedom after all the pain she had endured. "Stay here until I tell you it's safe." Sytheris nodded solemnly, but made no move to retreat further into the shadows once the door closed behind them. Instead, her eyes remained fixed on Marcus, as if trying to understand him completely in that brief moment before reality forced her away again. "Marcus," she called softly, after a beat of silence, and he turned back towards her one last time just as they faded from view. "Please be careful." He nodded once more, though there was an intensity in his eyes, no, not fear or hesitation, but something far darker that spoke volumes about what kind of man Marcus Cole had become over the years. "Always," he said quietly before stepping away and rejoining his battle against these new threats approaching at speed too great to ignore any longer. With every step back towards the front door, his resolve only strengthened, knowing exactly why this fight was worth fighting all over again. Sytheris Vel'Keth deserved more than whatever fate had dealt her so far. Outside in the gathering darkness, under a starless sky thick with clouds, threatening rain later tonight, Marcus met Tharn's hunters head on. They were no amateurs, these men and women moved efficiently through the trees as if they owned this land, even when every fiber of Marcus warned him otherwise. Their movements lacked grace, but made up for it in raw efficiency. Each knew their role within seconds of encountering resistance. As one approached to knock on his front door, demanding entry without much fuss or formalities, beyond shouting orders from behind a helmet concealing face and emotion alike, Marcus stepped forward with deliberate slowness, almost mocking the situation he faced. The camera feed inside showed Sytheris watching from cover, though whether she could see what was unfolding now remained unclear even to him. "You are under arrest," commanded the lead hunter, his voice gruff, yet clear through the speaker intercom system that had been activated automatically upon detecting their arrival at close range of his property lines. "We have orders to retrieve our missing item." Marcus' lips twisted into a grim smile as he responded back coldly, "But with certainty this isn't an arrest, friend, it's war." And then suddenly, there were gunshots echoing through the mountain valley's silence, followed swiftly thereafter by morning light breaking across his cabin windows once more. No sign remained of those hunters who came seeking property. Dead bodies lay strewn about in grim testament to Marcus' fury and skill honed over decades spent protecting lives, lost too often along battlefronts, distant yet somehow always near now that had found purpose here again. Inside, safe below ground level, Sytheris waited quietly through the long night with only intermittent sounds of conflict reaching her ears. Fear gnawing at heart, though tempered by belief, she had seen something rare and powerful in Marcus Cole, a warrior who fought not just for survival, but because fighting itself was what made him whole once more. When dawn finally broke over the horizon painting mountainsides gold, Sytheris ventured forth cautiously from shelter to find Marcus standing near her doorway unharmed, except perhaps by memories of violence done long ago relived today. In his eyes burned a fire, unquenched yet tempered now by something far deeper than mere revenge against those who harmed another. "Are you okay?" she asked softly as he turned towards her, reaching out gently without touching to ensure true safety where danger had once reigned supreme here. Marcus nodded slowly before answering with quiet conviction, "I am," though his gaze lingered on distant peaks, like an old enemy staring down from heights unseen, but never forgotten. "And you're safe now." Sytheris felt the weight of those words wash over her, a reassurance wrapped tightly around renewed hope born afresh amidst ashes left behind by conflict long past yet still ever present in aftermath lingering here. "We need to move," Marcus said finally, after a pause where silence spoke volumes more than any word could convey. "It's not safe anymore." And so they began their journey anew towards unknown destinations, guided now less by chance encounters and cruel fates, but rather decisions made with hearts heavy yet spirits lightened somehow, knowing whatever lay ahead would face together side by side under skies vast and stars countless stretching out beyond immediate reach of both human hand reaching forth into darkness or alien eyes staring back across voids unmeasured. But for this moment, in the quiet aftermath, where only breaths mingled softly between them against backdrop of dawn breaking finally over ravaged landscape left behind yesterday's horrors, Marcus felt alive again in ways he hadn't since war's end brought him here first, seeking solace rather than fight, yet finding instead something far greater within depths of despair where Sytheris had laid broken before. "Thank you," she whispered to him, now standing close enough for shadows cast by rising sun to touch both their faces intimately. "For everything." Marcus looked down at her then, meeting those violet eyes filled with gratitude and wonder alike, as something more than just acknowledgement, but genuine appreciation for actions taken not because of duty alone, but because heart demanded it regardless cost. "You're welcome," he replied simply yet fully meaning every word, as much gesture towards future ahead rather than past left behind. "Let's go." And thus began their new path forward, one forged amidst blood and tears shared between two souls finding strength together where once only suffering existed, without end in sight. The mountainside, like a reluctant witness to the night's carnage. Marcus stood at Sytheris' makeshift doorway, his presence both comforting and foreboding. Despite having no physical injuries of his own from the previous evening's skirmish, there was an undeniable heaviness around him, a weight carried in every step he took. "Are you okay?" Sytheris asked softly as she approached, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying with it all the concern and gratitude she felt. She hesitated before reaching out gently without touching to ensure true safety where danger had once reigned supreme here. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes moving from her face back towards the distant peaks that seemed to hold their own stories of conflict and loss. "I am," he said finally, though it was clear there were layers beneath those 2 words, layers of memory and emotion stirred by the fight just past. Sytheris felt a shiver run through her as she sensed his internal struggle. She knew this man well enough now to recognize when something more than simple survival lay in his ice of fire, unquenched yet tempered now by deeper emotions, beyond mere vengeance against those who had harmed another. "And you're safe now," he repeated, though the reassurance seemed almost as much for himself. "We need to move," Marcus said after a long moment of silence that spoke volumes more than any word could convey. The realization hung between them. It was not just about fleeing from immediate danger, but also recognizing that they could no longer linger in this place where shadows and memories of violence still clung like stubborn vines. Sytheris nodded, understanding the urgency without needing to question further. They had both seen enough to know staying any longer would only invite more trouble, perhaps even death, at their heels. Now that word was outward about how a mere human had dared stand against those who trafficked her kind, as if they were nothing but trophies. "We should take what we need," Sytheris suggested softly, nodding towards the cabin. "Clothing, food, anything else you think would be useful." Marcus nodded in agreement before leading them inside, where he quickly gathered essentials, food, water, and some medical supplies that had served him well during his years as a medic. While he packed silently, Sytheris moved about with practiced efficiency, collecting items she could use to maintain herself on the journey ahead. Once everything was ready, they set out along a trail Marcus knew well from previous explorations of these mountains. The air felt cooler in the early morning hours and carried whispers of potential dangers lurking just beyond their immediate sight line. But there was also an undeniable sense of renewal and awakening, as if something profound had shifted within both of them amidst the violence that had erupted around them. "Thank you," Sytheris whispered to him now, stopping briefly along a rocky outcropping where they could catch some breath and assess the terrain ahead. She reached out again, this time touching his hand lightly, a gesture more intimate than she had previously dared, yet one born of raw emotion rather than fear or hesitation. "For everything." Marcus looked down at her then, meeting those violet eyes filled with gratitude and wonder alike, as something more than just acknowledgement, but genuine appreciation for actions taken not because of duty alone, but because heart demanded it regardless cost. "You're welcome," he replied simply yet fully meaning every word, as much gesture towards future ahead rather than past left behind. "Let's go." And thus began their new path forward, one forged amidst blood and tears shared between 2 souls finding strength together, where once only suffering existed without end in sight. As they walked, Marcus became increasingly aware of the lingering presence of other beings, shunners who had been drawn to Sytheris' location due to rumors, or perhaps even direct communication from their employer. These were men trained for tasks far more brutal than what Marcus could handle with his limited resources and knowledge. Yet he knew that if they faced another confrontation, it would be unlike the first. Their attackers might come better prepared this time. Suddenly, a sharp crackling sound cut through the silence of nature around them, signal flare rising high into sky painted pale blue by early morning light. Marcus froze instantly, his eyes narrowing as he scanned surrounding areas for any sign of movement or threat. "Marcus?" Sytheris asked softly from beside him, her voice tinged with concern yet also resolve. "They are here," Marcus replied grimly, but without hesitation, moving forward towards the source of flare, a small clearing not far off where several figures were visible through trees. The men seemed surprised by Marcus' sudden appearance and armed stance. None dared approach immediately, though one stepped forward, revealing bloodied hands and torn clothing indicating recent struggle. "Who are you?" growled a burly man stepping from shadows, his eyes cold and assessing both Sytheris and Marcus with predatory intensity. Marcus didn't answer right away, instead focusing on the body language of those around him. He saw fear etched into faces, even as they tried to appear unshaken, fear born perhaps not just by seeing a human stand against them, but also knowing what such defiance might mean for future dealings back at base camp. "I am Marcus Cole," he finally said quietly, each word carrying weight like a hammer on stone, "and am here to protect Sytheris." The man sneered, then turned slightly, nodding towards others, gesturing sharply with hand signals indicating they should ready themselves for another round of combat, if necessary, but clearly wary given how quickly the tide had shifted against them last night. Before any action could be taken, however, Marcus raised his hands, signaling surrender, though there was no fear or weakness in that gesture, rather a calculated move designed to buy him time, and perhaps an advantage. "Tell me where your master is," he demanded coldly but evenly, ensuring none mistook intent behind those words. The man hesitated slightly before answering reluctantly, under pressure from unseen forces dictating this dance of violence back towards control over their captive alien prize. With one final nod, the burly hunter spoke low yet audible only to Marcus. "You'll never find him." Marcus snorted in derision, then stepped closer, circling predator like around remaining hunters who shrank further into defensive postures, waiting orders from above rather than engaging directly here. That was when he noticed one of them, a younger man, barely more than a boy, really hanging back slightly, looking lost and frightened. "Him," Marcus pointed out, suddenly catching Sytheris' attention as she watched proceedings with growing unease, but also recognition of tactics unfolding around her protector's chosen approach towards resolution. "Take him." The burly hunter nodded sharply, then signaled to remaining men, who moved quickly yet efficiently, surrounding the young one in center, grabbing hands, pinning arms tightly against body, preventing escape. "What are you doing?" Sytheris asked softly from beside Marcus, concern clear, though equally recognition of necessity behind such actions, if they hoped ever break cycle here and truly free her once more from tormentor's grasp. Marcus turned towards her, then gently touching shoulder, ensuring she knew what was about to happen, even as he addressed the group again firmly yet without unnecessary force. "I'm going to send a message." The young hunter looked at him in confusion mixed with fear, but Marcus only offered him one sharp nod before speaking loudly enough for all present company to hear clearly, over sound of wind whipping through trees surrounding them. "Tell your master that his property is under new protection," he said slowly, emphasizing each word carefully. "If anyone comes near her again, I will not stop with the hired help." The hunter looks at bodies lying still and cold on ground behind him, bodies of those who had served in place before, then to injured ones barely clinging on to life, knowing fate likely same for them now too, unless master himself intervened directly, which seemed unlikely given circumstances left surrounding area. The young man swallowed hard, then nodded stiffly, clearly understanding message conveyed without any words needed anymore between these two beings standing alone together against world-threatening Sytheris, once more, yet determined never let it come to pass again, if possible. "I will tell him," he finally whispered, though Marcus could see truth of commitment behind those eyes, truth that spoke louder than spoken word ever could. Marcus turned back towards Sytheris then, suddenly gentle again, despite the blood still caked around his fingers and on clothes from previous battles fought for this moment exactly. She saw in his face not just anger, but resolve mixed with deep compassion, a reminder of all he had lost, yet also found anew here, amidst violence-born necessity, that nonetheless sparked unexpected hope within fragile soul slowly healing. "You killed for me," Sytheris whispered softly, the weight of those words washing over her as she stepped closer to Marcus, who reached out without hesitation, this time embracing her briefly before pulling back, allowing space, but ensuring safety too. "You would do more." Marcus looked down at her, then meeting her eyes once again, though softer now, understanding truth of what had been said between them, what it meant not just in moment's context, but broader picture, where Sytheris' value extended far beyond physical beauty or even survival itself. "I will," he replied simply yet fully meaning every word, as much promise towards future ahead rather than past left behind. "Let's go." And thus began their new path forward, one forged amidst blood and tears shared between two souls finding strength together, where once only suffering existed, without end in sight. Marcus leading Sytheris further into mountains, perhaps even beyond them, but always with renewed purpose guiding every step taken from here on out. And the days that followed were filled with a strange blend of healing and recovery for both Marcus Cole and Lady Sytheris Vel'Keth. After their escape from the collector's lair, they had found refuge in Marcus' cabin nestled deep within the mountains, a sanctuary, away from the chaos they had left behind. Sytheris was weak, but gradually improving under Marcus' care. He moved with an efficiency that spoke of years of experience as a medic, his hands gentle yet firm when tending to her wounds, and each task he undertook reflected a silent resolve to protect what little she now clung onto her life, stolen away by the cruel whims of collectors. Marcus had made it clear in no uncertain terms that any attempt on Sytheris' safety would mean immediate retaliation. He had called his old military contacts, who were more than willing to spread word about Tharn's untimely demise being an unfortunate accident due to faulty equipment of fabrication. Yes, but one with the weight of authority behind it. As days turned into weeks, and weeks merged imperceptibly into months, Sytheris' wounds began to heal. Her once luminous silver blue skin regained some of its glow, though never fully returning to its original brilliance. Each day she grew stronger, her spirit slowly recovering from the trauma that had nearly broken it. Marcus found himself becoming more accustomed to life at his cabin again, but this time with a new companion by his side. Together they tended to the garden had started years ago, a place where flowers bloomed in defiance of harsh mountain winters and summer storms alike. Sytheris learned how to cook simple meals, while Marcus taught her about tending fires and building shelters. One crisp autumn evening, as twilight painted the mountains with hues of orange and purple, Sytheris stood beside Marcus by his window looking out at the stars scattered across a vast sky. The air was cool around them, carrying whispers of falling leaves from distant trees. She turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting an inner peace she hadn't known existed before. "Why did you save me?" she asked softly, breaking through the serene silence that had settled between them like mist over still water. Marcus' gaze followed hers back out into the night sky, where countless stars twinkled in silent promise. "My wife died 2 years ago," he replied quietly, after a moment of reflection. His voice was deep and steady, carrying an undercurrent of emotion beneath its surface. "I was just existing after that, going through motions." He turned to face her then, his tired blue eyes locking with hers for the briefest instant before looking away again towards those distant stars. Sytheris sensed something shift between them as Marcus spoke about losing someone close, a reminder of losses far more profound than mere captivity or physical injury could ever convey. "You gave me a reason to fight," he continued, his words filled with both sorrow and gratitude. "Not just for you, but for myself." The weight of those simple yet powerful truths hung between them like the stars above, unspoken connections woven into fabric of their shared journey through darkness towards light. Sytheris moved closer until she stood right beside him at window now, her hand reaching out almost hesitantly to touch his arm. "You gave me a reason to live," she murmured back softly, in return, as if completing some unspoken dialogue between them that stretched far beyond mere words or actions alone. Months passed into years since their escape from the collector's clutches. Sytheris never fully regained her original luminescence, but it mattered little now, because Marcus had shown her time and again how to see beauty within herself despite scars, both seen and unseen. They built a life together in mountains, where they found solace amidst nature's wild splendor, or a sanctuary forged from resilience born of shared traumas overcome. One spring morning, under clear blue skies streaked with clouds carrying ing promise of future rains, yet still warm enough for early blooms to begin coloring meadows around their cabin. Marcus surprised Sytheris by asking her if she would marry him. Sytheris blinked back tears at unexpected proposal, but managed smile when she realized how right it felt. Marcus had once given her wife's dress a garment delicate and soft, now altered carefully just so as to fit Sytheris perfectly despite differences in their forms still remaining from shared ordeal endured together months prior. On that same morning, under gentle spring sunlight filtering through trees surrounding them, Marcus led Sytheris down path towards small clearing where mountain winds whispered secrets only they could hear. They exchanged vows, simple yet profound promises made not just between two hearts, but spirits too bound now by love, found amidst ruins left behind long ago, when world had felt far less kind than it did today. Sytheris wore altered gown during ceremony held near mountainside, streams flowing with crystal clear water reflecting skies above them both. She looked up at Marcus, eyes filled once more not just sorrow or pain, but joy and hope now, to realization dawning within her that she could move forward without fear, because someone else would always be there beside her every step of way. And so ends their journey, a testament to strength, forged through adversity, shared two souls who saved each other from depths darker than stars above, yet found light once more shining brightly ahead.